And then we're going to extend the private networking capability out into SaaS and PaaS providers, whether they want us to or not. So some do. AWS has got Direct Connect and so on. You can directly connect into an AWS instance through a private network. Others, like Salesforce, do not want service providers to connect to them through a direct dedicated connection. So we're having to create ways to get around that because customers demanding privacy of traffic end to end. Because of the size of our IP backbone, we can look at where these flows of traffic come from and optimize the way that they enter into our network and then make them private so that effectively SaaS and PaaS and so on becomes part of the customer's data center network as opposed to a hop. We're focusing very much on cloud and DCI infrastructure, and this is something that we're in fact bringing together an industry forum to do, and Huawei is one of the contributors to that. But also other players like Juniper as well, and Avaya and so on, where we're looking at how could we make Ethernet fundamentally as a transport very much more scalable within the new cloud environment. So that then in fact makes SDN easier because you're not having to essentially patch Ethernet behavior at a control plane level. Ethernet can do Ethernet things, SDN can do SDN things, and the interaction is made significantly simpler. Our focus for DCIs is on layer 2, as I suggested earlier. There are alternative approaches. However, we've focused on layer 2 and only bring in layer 3 where it's really needed. Why? Because then we can force the network to do things that IP routing would not allow it to do. Deterministic pathing, for example. And really then our focus is looking at SDN within the data center walls mostly, and then some interaction between that and the WAN. But already we can supply customers with facilities such that by putting traffic in a certain VLAN, they get a certain routing behavior or a certain topology. So in fact, SDN doesn't significantly move us forward yet. So we're prepared to take that approach and then await the further development of SDN features and primitives within the wider WAN. So our view is that there is in fact in some ways a conflict, that what SDN does very well is deal with something which is a dynamic environment that needs to change frequently because it takes out the risk factor of people. However, SDN does not scale well when you ask it to do a lot of things very quickly. So somehow we need to solve those two pieces, that you want SDN to control a dynamic environment, however a very dynamic environment is difficult to scale. And that's basically my speech. So I don't bring a nirvana or an answer to any of these questions. I think just what I'm doing is giving you a context of at least what we're looking at, and as an industry what we're hoping that, that other people are looking at, and will eventually be able to deliver us some of the solutions and all of that. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Any questions? Yes, here.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi. I'm Miko from Huawei. I have a question with regards to your first step, with the application performance. Yeah. So as far as I understand the motivation for focusing on the application performance, I don't see how you as a service provider can focus on these applications, because after all you provide a network, and applications, some may traverse well over the WAN, some does not. So I don't see how much of an impact do you have on the applications.
So the complaint we get from customers today is that their internal users phone them up and say, my SAP is working really slowly. And then they phone us up and then we say, hey look, packet loss, availability, jitter, I'm fine, I'm within parameters, your problem. Customers really, really, really hate that. So the first stage for me is to at least gain visibility of what the performance of the application is. I can certainly measure how much of the delay in an application is due to the network as opposed to the end server. So at least in collaborating with the customer, I can identify where the problem area actually exists. Is it my fault or is it your fault? And at the moment, that's extremely not well defined, and as I say, it drives customers nuts. The struggle that we're having is it does not exist in the market today, something which looks at per user application experience in a very scalable kind of way. Today we use Exindr. Exindr will tie into Active Directory, and it will give a view of a traffic flow on a per customer basis. We're trying to get down to that level of granularity. There's nobody who's taken that forward into a carrier model that says I've got to have a parent relationship with children. Those children relationships, I then need to be able to see individual users within those, and then I need to manage the overall network from an application perspective, and that's where we're working at. I agree that we can't guarantee the end-to-end performance, except that we ourselves also run 42 data centers, and we have cloud services, and we have servers and all that sort of thing. So if the customer chooses to put their environment inside our environment, then yes, I can provide an end-to-end view of it and guarantee the performance end-to-end. If they're going to have a hybrid environment, which is much more likely, then I need to have as much visibility as possible of all the different components that go to make up that network. So I agree it's not a nirvana, but it's a heck of a lot better than what they have today.
Thank you.
Other questions? The back.
Hello, Pavel Zlowski from Adva Optical. I also have a question to point number one. Did you say that you are moving away from MPLS there?
So what I said is I've got two, from my point of view, I've got two platforms. So I've got a private IP network which is built on MPLS, and then I have an Ethernet network which actually runs PBB. So I have a choice what environment I deploy the customer in. At the moment, my focus on application performance reporting and management is within the MPLS environment. However, we do expect to converge the PBB platform onto the same physical equipment and run, if you like, PBB and MPLS within the same box, and then we can reuse the capability to look at the applications. So today, DCI is basically large volume, large pipes and all that sort of thing, and deep packet inspection doesn't tend to work very well in that sort of scenario. So we're really focusing on the application delivery from the data center out to the offices and so on, rather than doing deep packet inspection directly on DCI today. So for that reason, it's focused on MPLS.
Okay, thank you.
We still have time for one more question. Yes.
Michael Roth from Adva Optical. I have a question with regard to SDN responsibility. We heard yesterday a lot about our common off-the-shelf hardware getting costs down. So finally, you may end up as a carrier with having a network consisting out of bits and pieces. Would you take the responsibility to all that works perfectly together? Or do you put someone else in charge you can point on, your network is failing?
So taking your abstraction of the networking layer and then putting an abstraction of a manager on top of it. At the end of the day, the value that a carrier delivers to a customer is control of the pieces that go to make up their solution. We may not choose to provide all of it, but we would certainly want to manage the large part of it. So if you like, my focus is moving towards managing the experience as opposed to directly managing the hardware and the network. So I might do the opposite of what you say. I might say that the hardware management and that sort of layer might be something that I might want to outsource because it's commoditized as far as I'm concerned. But the application experience, the application management, and the sort of overall delivery of that experience might be something that I retain. So it's really where as carriers we can retain revenue, because my desire is as a carrier is to avoid a situation where 10 years from now everybody's enabled SDN in their WAN, everybody's connected to Equinix, customers connect to Equinix and then say, I need 50 meg to Cambodia for the next 30 minutes, and who can give it to me? And then everybody's interchangeable at that point. Don't think that's desirable for us really as an industry, and it's not particularly desirable from a customer point of view either. We can do better than that. So I want to retain the relationship between the customer and the experience that they receive. Whether I want to actually manage network elements within that, I'm open to debate. It's going to be a cost decision.
Thank you. Hi, I have one more short question. When you talk about PBB, are you intending to extend to PBB-TE or not?
So we're in the interesting position of being the only operator I'm aware of that runs a global PBB core. So we run that, and I reach almost 40 countries now with PBB. So the control plane that we use at the moment is we use access control lists, we use G8032 for failover and all of that sort of thing, and we don't actually need to run a control plane because it's not a sufficiently complicated network. In the future, what we're looking at is SPB MAC. That's very sensible for us because it allows us to control the wider WAN, but it's also something we can potentially extend all the way into the data center, all the way up to the top of rack switch. So you can have a unified control all the way from the top of rack switch all the way out. Now, maybe SDN will replace that more quickly than I think that it will, but in the meantime, that's our strategic view. So TE doesn't really exist anymore. It's sort of got evolved into PLSB and then PLSB into SPB and all that sort of thing. So we're onto SPB now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, James.